Hey everybody, Fletch from All Things Overlanding here. On today's episode of the vlog / podcast, I'm going to be talking about comfort versus necessity. So, we've kind of talked about things that are, essential from a gear standpoint. We've talked about, overlanding, which is kind of a different topic, and that's why I wanted to kind of touch on this. I don't want to blow up the internet. That's not my goal today. Like with the overlanding thing, it kind of went a little haywire. I'm not going to lie. It was great because it started a conversation. And again, the goal with that video was not at all to point fingers or say anything bad about anybody that loves the look of their truck having 50 jerry cans on it, right? Again, it supports the overlanding lifestyle. That's fine. Anyone can do whatever they want with their trucks, right? Like I don't want to tell anyone what to do with their trucks. However, on this episode, getting away from the overlanding thing, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is absolutely necessary in order to go overlanding versus what is a comfort. And again, before I blow up the internet, just to preface this, I want to say I have both in my setup. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on kind of my thoughts and does it really matter towards the end. So if you want to hear more about that, stay tuned, watch all the way through. Let's get into it. All right, guys. So as I mentioned, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about necessity versus comfort. If you are a car camper / overlander / whatever you want to call it, right? Like that, I do see that a lot where it's almost becoming taboo to call yourself an overlander. And I mean, let's be honest, there are a lot of guys that go camping / overlanding way more than I do, right? So I even kind of have that stigma about myself sometimes. So just being honest about it. I think, you know what, I have this channel and it's called All Things Overlanding and I'm big into overlanding, but like how many trips do I take a year? Maybe 15, 20? Is that enough? Am I a legit enough overlander that I can really call myself that? And I think we're all getting way too wrapped up in terminology, right? So before I get started, I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit. I think overlanding, that whole vehicle dependent travel where the journey is more the goal than the destination. That's what matters, right? That's why I always say it doesn't matter what kind of car you have or SUV or truck or whatever. It's about that mentality. It's about getting out there. It's about wanting to explore. It's about wanting to, test yourself, test your vehicle's limits, test your packing capabilities, test your gear. That's what overlanding is really about. So all these people that are like, ooh, it's just car camping, whatever, that's fine. And you can think that. And again, everybody is entitled to their own opinions. I just say, if you are into the overlanding lifestyle, if you love the idea of thinking about your packing list, right? If you make a Google spreadsheet and you list out all your stuff and you pack, extremely carefully for each trip, and then you go on these trips and you actually go for adventure and you take pictures and you see the sights and you enjoy the travel and you talk to people, that's what really matters. So that said, again, let's dive into the topic here. So I'm going to start with necessities. So I'm going to kind of go through my thoughts on what are absolute necessities for an overlanding trip. Again, whether it's a 1 or 2 day or a 2 week or 4 week or 8 week, it doesn't matter, right? Like what are the necessities that you absolutely have to have? Comforts aside, right? Like just to survive and be able to take a trip, what do you need to do? So let's dive into necessities. Starting first with, you have to have some sort of shelter, whether it's a hammock and a tarp, whether it's sleeping in your vehicle, whether it's a tent with a fly on it, you have to have something like that. That's absolutely non-negotiable. I guess you could technically sleep out under the stars if the weather will cooperate, right? If it's nice enough, if it's not snowing, if it's not raining, if it's not just terrible. You could even forego tent, hammock, all that stuff, tarp, everything, no awnings, no nothing, and just sleep in your vehicle. You could do that. But then again, we're bordering on, is it even overlanding or are you just homeless, right? And nothing against that, but what is your definition of overlanding, right? So I kind of define it as having some sort of a shelter, again, tent, tarp, hammock, whatever that may be. What that wouldn't include in the necessities is like an inflatable sleeping pad, a cot, a rooftop tent, like that sort of stuff, right? So you have to have some sort of a shelter when you go camping. On top of that, you have to have some sort of something to keep you warm, whether it's a sleeping bag, a wool blanket, a comforter from home, something to wrap yourself up in so that you can survive the night, right? So you have to have something like that. In addition to that, you have to have some sort of food. So again, if we're literally just going based off of necessity, then that could be something like, you could bring a loaf of bread and some peanut butter, right? Like you could do that. You could bring hot dogs. That's pushing it because then you need a cooler, right? And a cooler is not necessarily a necessity. So you could just bring the most basic of foods. You could stop at a restaurant and eat lunch at McDonald's on your way into the forest and bring, something like this, like beef jerky or some sort of bagged peanuts or something that doesn't require refrigeration. You could bring something like that and you could survive. You could have a good trip. You could bring a whole bunch of stuff like this, right? You could bring your Wolf brand chili, which I've reviewed before. If you have a can opener for it, and this, you could literally set this on a rock, which I've done before, and cook it over a fire. Heat it up and then eat it. You don't even have to have a spoon. You could literally cut the lid off and bend it in half and use that as a spoon if you wanted to, right? So if you wanted to be crazy and go that deep into survival mode, you could do that. You have to be able to go to the bathroom, right? You don't have to have a fancy toilet. You don't have to have even a 5-gallon bucket with a seat on it. You could just have a shovel, like a little folding shovel, and some toilet paper. You don't even have to have toilet paper. You can use leaves if you really want to go that deep into it, right? But again, we get into that whole, is it worth it? Like, what kind of trip are you trying to take, right? When you're just focused on the necessities and you're just like everybody else is just a fake overlander if they're bringing toilet paper and 5-gallon buckets and blah, 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 right? But so still, necessity-wise, toilet paper, maybe a shovel, if that, right? Something to start a fire with. So again, if you're just going pure necessity-based camping, maybe a match. Maybe not even that. Maybe you're talking about a bow string, and you're using friction to start a fire. A magnifying glass, your glasses, and you're focusing the sun's rays to start a fire, right? But you need something to start a fire. I wouldn't call that glamping or a comfort item if you brought, a lighter and some sort of like lint or something from your dryer, something to start a fire with. Or you could create your own tinder. You could go bushcraft and you could use a knife and shave twigs down and make tinder and then start it that way. That would also be considered a necessity. So if you wanted to go bare bones as possible, that would be a good option. You can kind of look at it, in my opinion, from like a backpacker kind of standpoint, right? Like imagine if you only had one, say, 40-liter backpack worth of stuff. What would you bring with you if you could do that? That's how you could look at this from a necessity standpoint for overlanding, right? And then I would also argue recovery is a necessity. So not necessarily a winch, not necessarily any sort of snatch blocks or, anything extra, but at least some sort of recovery point, a D-ring, a hook, something, and some sort of a strap so that worst case you could flag somebody down and have them help pull you out if you got stuck. Traction mats, things like that. Those could be good things to have. But, again, that gets a little bit more sketchy, right? So that kind of pushes that border of, am I truly self-reliant then if I have a strap and I have to wait on somebody else to come and pull me out? Am I really an overlander if I'm not self-reliant, right? So we have to weigh that out when we're talking about necessity versus comfort. Recovery gets a little tricky. So, when I think about these things, I try to think through okay, so I've talked through now the necessities, right? There are a lot of niceties that you could bring with you. But you could go to camp. Like I said, you could shave down a tree, make your own tinder, find some dry moss, things like that. You could start a fire that way. But you could also break down wood by hand. Like, you don't have to have a chainsaw or an axe or a folding saw or anything like that. You could just take logs and break them up, or you could feed them into a fire. There's a million ways that you can make that work, right? Without all those tools. So that is a possibility. Like I mentioned, you can just bring stuff that doesn't require cooking, right? You could bring stuff that you pick up at the gas station. You could stop on your way in and then just bring snacks. Bring some Pringles or something, right? You can bring some chili and you could cook this over a fire. You don't need a grill or propane or regulators or anything like that. You just need literally this can, a can opener, and a fire. That's all you need, right? So again, thinking about necessities. And then as far as I've already kind of mentioned too, the pooping, right? Like you could just go out and lean on a tree and you can poop in the woods. And you don't even really have to have toilet paper if you want. You could get some leaves off of a tree and you can do that, right? So those are necessities, right? So just kind of talking about the things that you absolutely have to have, that kind of covers the necessities. So now I want to move on to the comfort things. And again, prefacing this by saying I have many of both of these things. The necessities, absolutely I have. The comfort things, I try and get as much as I can into my truck. But so kind of talking about what are considered comfort items, right? Things like a folding chair. You don't have to have a folding chair. You could find a log or you could find a rock or something and you could sit on that. You don't have to have a folding chair. However, in my opinion, that's one of the worst things. Like I have gone once or twice to an overlanding get together with multiple people, and I get there and I realize, crap, I left my chair at home. And I tell you what, it changes the whole trip, man. Like it just changes everything. It's not nearly as much fun as if you remember to bring it. So while that is a comfort thing, it also, again, when you're looking at it from the whole, like, is my trip going to be a fun one or is it going to be one that I survive? That's where it blurs the line between comfort and necessity for me. But continuing on, as I kind of mentioned too, these other things for sleeping, right? When you're sleeping, you could absolutely sleep on the ground. You could throw your sleeping bag right on the dirt and you could lay down, you go to sleep. You're probably going to sleep like crap. You're probably going to be cold. You're probably going to have a sore back the next day. I mean, but you could do it, right? You could. So things for comfort would be things like a hammock, cot, rooftop tents are pretty glamperish, right? Like the ability to pop up this tent with padding built into it on top of your vehicle, stay away from all the bugs, animals, everything else. That's pretty nice to have. It's not a necessity, but it's pretty nice to have. Things like a grill, right? I've got my double burner in the back of my truck and a drawer system, which a drawer system is another thing that's really just there for comfort and convenience, right? Like I don't have to have a drawer system to go overlanding. But popping that grill out, popping a regulator on, plugging in some propane, turning on a grill, lighting it up with a lighter or a match, all that stuff is pretty comfort driven, right? Like I don't do that because I have to. I do it because I want to have a good trip. I want to enjoy some good food. And I don't want to have to cook it over an open fire in a can, right? Tables, things like folding tables. My chair has a side table that folds out on it. I don't have to have that, but it is a nice thing to have, and it does make the trip more enjoyable. As I mentioned, a winch, right? So a winch is not an absolute necessity. It's one of those things that it has a high cost associated with it. You have to have a bumper or something that you can mount the winch on. It involves, if you're not, vehicularly savvy and you can't install something like that and wire it up yourself, then you've got to pay someone else to do that. That costs money. That's, something that you don't have to do. So that could be considered that as well. A cooler, as I mentioned, like having a cooler is kind of a comfort thing, right? To be able to bring some energy drinks and some steaks and, a beer or something like that. You don't have to do that. That isn't a comfort thing. Beer, as I mentioned, beer is a comfort thing. Like if you are a beer drinker or something cold, you like to have some sort of a drink with you at camp. That's not a necessity. You don't have to have that to go overlanding. Meat, steak, pork, hot dogs, hamburgers, anything that you might bring with you that's going to require refrigeration, not a necessity. However, again, the difference between eating, peanuts or beef jerky the whole trip and cooking a steak with some peppers and some potatoes and stuff over a fire on a big skillet or scuttle or cast iron grill, whatever, can make all the difference. Solar, another thing. Although that could kind of go both ways, right? Like if you're going to be off-grid for a long period of time, solar could be a necessity. Something to recharge your batteries, to keep your battery topped off for your vehicle. That may be a necessity. In my case, it's more of a nice to have because I don't hook my solar up to my main starter battery. I hook it up to an auxiliary battery that I use to recharge things. However, I charge my chainsaw batteries off that battery pack. So without my chainsaw, which again is kind of a comfort thing, I can't process wood nearly as efficiently, nearly as fast. I can't chop down trees nearly as fast, that sort of stuff. In winter months, colder months, a heater, things like that are a nice to have. Hot hands, the little chemical packets that you might take with you and throw in your sleeping bag to keep warm. All that stuff is kind of a nice to have. You don't necessarily have to have it to survive, but it makes your trip a heck of a lot better, right? So again, kind of wrapping this up, trying to keep it under 20 minutes here. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. So in my opinion, here's what I think, guys. I think, half the fun of going on an overlanding trip is looking at your rig, looking at your gear, and playing that game of Tetris, right? Making a spreadsheet, planning everything out, checking off the boxes, packing everything up, making sure that it fits, and then going on the trip. In my opinion, and again, I've kind of already said this a couple times, I bring both every time. Because not only do I want to be self-sufficient, I want to meet those minimum necessary requirements to survive on an overlanding trip. I also want to have fun. Like, I want to bring my Nintendo Switch sometimes and sit around the fire and play my Nintendo Switch if I'm by myself, if I'm going solo. I want to bring a cooler with steak in it and vegetables and beer so that I can hang out with friends around a campfire and make it a better trip, right? So in my opinion, it doesn't matter. Right? So we all talk about this and we're all like, you're not a real overlander because you don't have a fridge freezer, or vice versa. You're a glamper because you have a rooftop tent, whatever. In my opinion, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're in a Prius. It doesn't matter if you're in a, 100 series. I'm not a Toyota guy. Sorry, guys. If you're in an Infiniti QX56, or if you're in a base model S Nissan Xterra, right? Or a Nissan Sentra, and you're in some pretty casual terrain where you can just drive down some gravel roads or some sandy roads and be at camp. It doesn't matter. Same with your gear. It doesn't matter if you have, the nicest flushable toilet and a shower and all this stuff. If that's what you want and you can fit it in your rig and you can make it for that trip, good for you. I say go for it. So again, I hope that was helpful for you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, because I feel like this is something I see a lot on overlanding Facebook groups and, forums and boards and things like that, where people are always like arguing about, oh, they bring this and they bring that. And that makes them not a real overlander. That does make them a real overlander. Or they have stickers or they have patches or what. It doesn't matter, right? Like, in my opinion, it really doesn't matter. I hope you guys agree with me, but I don't really care, honestly. Like, I want you guys to have your own opinions about this stuff too. And no one's right. I'm not saying I'm right. Right? So that's my opinion. I hope that sparks some conversation without some hatred, but we'll see. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below. Please comment below and let me know your thoughts on it too. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have some gear that you think is absolutely necessary that I missed. I kind of forgot to talk about water now that I think back to it. I have a 5-gallon and a 7-gallon jug that I use when I go camping. You do need water. That is an important thing too. So if you guys have some other stuff, some other gear that's necessary for you, if you have some glamperish, nice comfort stuff that you love but you would never go on a trip with, comment down below and tell me about that stuff. So thank you guys again for listening. I really appreciate it. If you don't already, please, click the subscribe button over here. I put out new content every week. I'd love to engage with you guys. I'd love to hear from you. So I hope you guys are having a great week, and I will look forward to talking to you soon. Get out there, live, learn, discover, and we'll talk soon.